Hey guys, I think I am live. I am not. Okay. All right, guys. So we are back online and we are back with a bang. And I'm taking my first class after a long time, and it's going to be on historical background. Okay. So this discussion is basically about the first chapter in Laxmikanth, which basically deals with the historical background, the laws and the regulations. So essentially, what we will be discussing is going to be the some of the finer points and the finer details about the laws and regulations. Okay, we are going to be dealing with the acts and the policies of government of India, how things came to be as they were and as they are, and how that is going to be, and how those acts and policies are relevant for different competitive papers like UPSC, your net, your state services, and all other kinds of papers. Okay, so we are going to be discussing all of this today in this class, and I'll be discussing all this with you through my work here. And of course, before I begin, I'll tell you a little about myself. So my name is Swastika Sharma. I have qualified UGC NET. I have done my MA in CPS from Jawaharlal Nehru University. I've done BA Political Science honors from DU. I enjoy playing lawn tennis, I enjoy teaching, and I enjoy studying PSIR. Also, I like entrepreneurship. I have my own brands. I do a lot of cool stuff. I'm also counseling, so if you guys are interested in getting counseled, you should definitely enroll, and you should definitely subscribe to my channel. Press the red button, and yep, we're home, we're on a home run, and we're ready to go. Okay, all right, so let's move on. Let's start discussing. The Britishers came to India in 1600 as traders, and it was known as the East India Company, and it had purely trading functions. Okay, in 1965 EIC had obtained Diwani rights. Just one more second, I'm really sorry, there seems to be some kind of there seems to be some issue. I'm just going to correct it, and as soon as this is corrected completely, I'm just going to yeah, let's just, okay, we're back on. Now the screen should be a little smaller, but this is still not happening as it should happen. It's not happening as it should happen. There is some problem, some kind of some issues are there. All right, I think this is a little better. If there's anyone on the chat, please don't forget to say hi. Just you can just say hi to me, and I'll just be on the chat and I'll reply to you guys, hopefully. Okay, anyway, let's try to still understand what we can easily understand through this, despite some malfunctions in how the technological part should get carried. Let's try to plunge ahead. Okay, so the first point is that the British came to India in 1600 as traders. East India Company had purely trading functions. Okay, so in 1765 the EIC obtained Diwani rights. Shah Alam granted these rights after losing the Battle of Buxar against East India Company. This started its career as its territorial power. Revolt of 1857 was also known as the First War of Independence or the Sepoy Mutiny. Okay. In 1858, the British Crown assumes direct responsibility for the governance of India. That is, the company rule ends and the Crown rule starts. Diwani rights were generally rights which were exercised, rights over revenue and the civil justice of Bengal, Bihar and Odisha. Okay, so guys, we have studied a little modern history. Okay, and I have had the opportunity of even studying it with you. Okay, so in that we know for a fact that the Portuguese, they were the first to come to India. Okay, and this was generally followed by your French, Okay, so in Portuguese, every year UPSC asks question, and we have travelers like Vasco da Gama who came later. We have travelers like Nina da Cunha who came, and generally it was during the time of the Portuguese that the cartas system was also introduced. Okay, so all of these things happened during the time of the Portuguese. Okay, after that we had the French, we had the Danes, and we also had the East India Company, right? Okay, so let me just see, why is this, it's just coming a lot smaller than what I thought it should. Anyway, so we also have the East India Company coming, right, and coming to India. And essentially when they came, they did not come as people who would just settle in India. They came as traders. Okay, so they did not just come from the motive that that we want to establish complete domination and complete control over Indians. In fact, they came with the idea that they simply want to trade. Okay, they want to act as traders, and they basically want to collect revenue. So they never had the plan, and they never had the intention of ruling India and taking over the civil and the political and the administrative capacity of the Indian system. Okay, they just wanted money. They came as a trading company, right? And when did they come? They came in 1600. So guys, after they came, the East India Company came, we saw it. Of course, they came in 1600 as traders, and in 1765 we saw something else. Okay, we saw that not only were they acting as traders, but the East India Company had also gained something which was called as Diwani rights. Okay, and these Diwani rights were granted after losing a battle of Buxar against EIC. So again, when we study polity, we need to have some idea about Indian history. So guys, there was a battle of Plassey. Okay, this battle of Plassey was fought by we had the Battle of Plassey, which was fought exactly 100 years before we had the revolt of 1857. So 100 years before that makes it 1757. Okay, so in 1757 we had the Battle of Plassey, which was fought by the British East India Company over Nawab of Bengal and the French people. So the EIC was basically being led by Robert Clive. Okay, so Robert Clive versus Siraj Uddola. Okay, so Siraj Uddola versus EIC Robert Clive. So what happened in this battle was really funny, that okay, so I'll tell you exactly what happened in this battle. But before I start with that, can you guys please like the video? Please like it, and if somebody is there on the live chat, then please say hi to me, so I at least have some kind of response and an idea about that there are people here. Okay, people who are watching my channel. So anyway guys, let's come back to the point. The point that we were discussing was that there was a Battle of Plassey which happened in 1757. Okay, exactly 100 years before 1857, the first revolt of independence, or the first Sepoy mutiny happened. We had the Battle of Plassey. Now the Battle of Plassey was essentially fought by Robert Clive, who was the East India Company counterpart, versus Siraj Uddola. And the only reason Siraj Uddola lost this battle was because his junior, his second in command, Mir Jafar, defected. Okay, he gave away the trade secrets, he gave away the secrets, he gave away all the important things, all the important facts about what was supposed to happen. He completely gave that top secret information to the East India Company. So Mir Jafar defected, and hence the victory was won by East India Company. Okay, so we know that, and after this, the Britishers were smart people. They decided that yes, let's make Mir Jafar the new Nawab of Bengal. Okay, but the Britishers felt that he was no puppet ruler. Mir Jafar was not a puppet. Okay, he was in fact very smart, he was very sharp, and therefore they thought, and he was ambitious. So the East India Company, again led by Robert Clive, decided to remove him and to replace him by his junior, which was Mir Qasim. Okay, so this was the Battle of Plassey, and this is relevant to this topic because it was after the Battle of Plassey that we had the Battle of Buxar. Okay, and this Battle of Buxar is important because in 1765, after East India Company won the battle, okay, and it was basically, fought by Shah Alam, the Indian counterpart. He lost it, and of course East India Company won it, and by winning it they gained Diwani rights. Okay, now this is of course important. Okay, Diwani rights. When was this? Diwani rights happened in 1765, guys. And why is this important? This is important because as soon as the East India Company gained these rights, they got the rights over revenue and the civil justice of Bengal, Bihar and Odisha. Okay, Bengal, Bihar, Odisha. Okay, and this point is important that they got these rights. Why is it important, guys? It is important because now the company was not simply acting as a trading power. Remember, when it came in 1600, East India Company came as a company which simply wanted to trade. However, after they won the Diwani rights, after the battle in 1765, which was called the Battle of Buxar, you can call it BOB, which was lost by Shah Alam, the East India Company gained these Diwani rights, and these Diwani rights essentially gave the company the right of civil justice and military over Bengal, Bihar and Odisha. Okay, so over 3 states we enjoyed these rights. Alright, so guys, this is what happened. We know exactly 100 years after the Battle of Plassey in 1857, there was another battle which was called the Sepoy Mutiny. Okay, or in which a lot of stuff happened, which we will again discuss in more depth in some time. So when this battle happened in 1857, this company rule which had began after we obtained the Diwani rights was no longer there. In fact, now we had something which was called the crown rule. Okay, so again I will explain it to you in an easier fashion. Okay, let me just okay, so guys, whoever is there on the chat, say hi. Hi Swastika, it's going to be a long class. I'm generally tired at night, so I make sure that this is the time that I sit down and I explain things that I can remember, I can recall in such a manner that I remember the stuff that I'm studying for, and you guys also manage to remember some of the stuff. Okay, so 3 important junctures, guys. 1600, East India Company came as traders. Okay, 1765, Diwani rights happened. Diwani rights happened after Battle of Buxar, and of course let's not forget in 1757 we had the Battle of Plassey, which we lost. Anyway, Battle of Buxar we lost, and hence the Diwani rights were taken. So at this point here on began the company rule. Okay, which was solidified by the first Regulating Act of 1773. And again in 1857, when we had the first war of independence, or let's call it the Sepoy Mutiny, it gave birth to something which was called the Crown Rule. Okay, now let's take a look at the notes. Yeah, and this Crown Rule, guys, basically can't just kept happening and didn't stop till 1947. Okay, I hope this draws a clearer picture of what is being taught. Okay, so guys, there's another way of understanding this. Let's take a look back at let's take a fresh page first of all, and and now let's see. Okay, so we understand two things. The first thing is that there was something which was called a company rule, and the second thing is that there was something which was called a crown rule. Okay, so the company rule basically began from 1773, when we had the first Regulating Act. In fact, you can say it began from before that time as well, but let's take the number to be 1773, when we had the first Regulating Act, and this company rule continued from 1773 to 1857, 1858 मान लो, ठीक है. And the Crown Rule began from 1858 to 1947. 1947, India obtained something. India obtained its own independence. Alright. So, is there anyone even watching this video? Or am I just speaking to myself? So, there were some important acts which happened in the company rule. We had acts which were called the Regulating Acts. We had acts which were called the Pitt's India Act. We also had the Charter Act. Okay, so these three were basically signified the company rule. Okay, and of course during the Crown Rule we had all your Government of India Acts. Okay, we had all your Indian Council Acts, and lastly we had something which was called your Indian Act of Independence. Okay, okay, company rule. By 1773, the East India Company was in dire financial troubles as they faced competition from other countries and also was facing difficulties to maintain the monopoly. The company was important to the British Empire because it was a monopoly trading company in India and in the East, and many influential people were shareholders. Now these shareholders, some of them parliamentarians, thought, what shall we do with EIC? They are not able to make or bring enough profits and are unable to meet their commitments. Okay, yes, so let us have some control and regulation in EIC, and let's call it a Regulating Act. So guys, what were the factors? What factors led to the first Regulating Act? We know that there was a Regulating Act which happened in 1773, but the question is that what factors basically led to a situation in which we needed a Regulating Act? So guys, the answer is simple. There was rampant corruption which was happening in the administrative system. People were just doing anything. Okay, they would just be very, very corrupt. There was absolutely no control. There was no space of regulation. Things were just going absolutely haywire, and it was the rule of the jungle which was essentially happening. So it was felt, there was felt a need of regulation, and hence the Regulating Act of 1773 was passed. Okay, to regulate the environment, the company thought that we need to put an end to the rampant corruption that is happening. We need to put an end to the things, all the negative things that are happening, and for that let us have something which is called as a regulating act by the company. Okay, so why was this act important? It was the first step taken by British government to control and regulate the affairs of EIC in India. First time British government recognized the political and administrative functions of the EIC. Alright, so the first time it was the British government recognized the political and administrative functions of EIC. The British government laid the foundations of the central administration in India. Okay, so it was the first step taken by British government to control and regulate. This we have already understood. The Regulating Act was the first step which was taken by the company to make sure that there was some kind of regulation that was happening, to make sure that some kind of an end to the corruption was happening. And for the first time the British government recognized the political and administrative functions of EIC. So it acted as more than just a trading company. It also recognized the political and administrative functions of EIC. The British government laid the foundations of central administration in India. All right. The act designated the Governor General of Bengal as the Governor General of Bengal. The Governor of Bengal as the Governor General of Bengal, and created an executive council of 4 members to assist him. Alright. The first such governor was Lord Warren Hastings. So guys, what happened? I'll explain all that to you. The Governor of Bengal was made the Governor General of Bengal, and governors of Bombay, Madras presidencies were made his subordinate. The Act provided for the establishment of Supreme Court 1774, which comprised of 1 CJI whose name was Sir Elijah Impey and 3 other judges. The real objective was to control and manage the corrupt EIC. Okay, so of course the first thing there is that the East India Company was corrupt. So the real objective was that we wanted to manage the corruption that was happening in EIC at that point of time. So the act prohibited servants of EIC from engaging in any private trade or accepting bribes and gifts from the native. The act told the governing body of the company, that is Court of Directors, to report all its affairs to British government. Okay, so let's simplify this, guys. This basically, we are being told something. We are being told the first point there is that the Governor of Bengal was now the Governor General. ठीक है, इसका मतलब था कि उसके अंडर 3 प्रेसिडेंसीज थी गाइस. बंगाल गवर्नर जनरल के अंडर आता था, बिहार एंड आई थिंक मद्रास बोला. ठीक है, तो ये तीनों जो थे ना गवर्नर जनरल ऑफ बंगाल के अंडर आते थे, और इनके जो एग्जीक्यूटिव काउंसिल में थे वो +4 मेंबर्स थे. ठीक है, सो फर्स्ट पॉइंट तो आपका ये हो गया. और इसमें जो था ना, गवर्नर को बहुत ज़्यादा पावरफुल बनाया था. इट वॉज नॉट अ लाइट सीट, इट वॉज इन फैक्ट अ प्रिटी हैवी सीट. द सेकेंड इम्पॉर्टेंट पॉइंट हियर इज़ दैट द सुप्रीम कोर्ट वॉज एस्टैब्लिश्ड. ठीक है, एक सुप्रीम कोर्ट इस्टेब्लिश करी थी कि हाँ, दे अंडरस्टूड दैट देयर वाज करप्शन, सो देयर वाज ऑल्सो अ नीड ऑफ जुडिशरी विच वॉज फेल्ट. सो एंड इट हैड 1 CJI. His name was Elijah Impey, and it had 4 other judges. ठीक है, तो फर्स्ट पॉइंट तो ये हो गया कि जो गवर्नर जनरल की काउंसिल थी उसमें 4 मेंबर्स और थे, और उसमें जो थे उनके जो फर्स्ट गवर्नर जनरल था वो था लॉर्ड वॉरेन हेस्टिंग्स. ठीक है, वॉरेन हेस्टिंग्स जो थे आपके फर्स्ट गवर्नर जनरल थे. सेकेंड इम्पॉर्टेंट पॉइंट ये है कि जो सुप्रीम कोर्ट था वो इस्टेब्लिश हुआ था पहली बारी, और इसमें जो सीजेआई थे उनका नाम था सर एलिजा इम्पी, एंड उनके साथ 3 और जजेस थे, ठीक है। सो ये आपका 1744 में इस्टेब्लिश हुआ था गाइस। आर वी अंडरस्टैंडिंग? I think we are, yes. ठीक है, so the regulating act, there was Governor General plus 4 members, and he was basically coming under Bengal, Bihar, and I mean these 3 came under him, right? These 3 presidencies, they came under him. The second important thing was Supreme Court 1774. It had 1 CJI plus it had 3 judges, ठीक है, ये पॉइंट था। थर्ड पॉइंट है आपका, और इसमें जो जज CJI था इनका नाम था सर एलिजा इम्पी, सी। सो दैट इज समथिंग विच इज़ इम्पोर्टेंट, ओके। ये आपका एक पॉइंट था, एंड ऑफ कोर्स ये एक पॉइंट ये था कि यू नो वी हैड समथिंग विच वाज कॉल्ड एज अ कोर्ट ऑफ डायरेक्टर्स. So a court of directors was needed to look into the functions, to look into the political and administrative functions. Okay, so these were some of the important points. You have to remember all these points if you are preparing for any competitive exam, because you can get asked any of these questions. Of course, the first Governor General of बंगाल वॉज वॉरेन हेस्टिंग्स, एंड उनको बोला था कि आप कोई ब्राइब नहीं ले सकते, आप किसी के साथ एक्सपेंसिव गिफ्ट्स नहीं एक्सचेंज कर सकते, आप ऐसा कुछ भी नहीं कर सकते. इनफैक्ट गाइज, वंस यू नो एंटर द ब्यूरोक्रेसी, वंस यू एंटर द गवर्नमेंट मैकेनिशंस, यू विल इन फैक्ट सी दैट एज अ ब्यूरोक्रेट you cannot accept any gifts, any tokens, anything like that. So the regulating act which happened in 1773 was also something like that. But do you guys really think that the regulating act helped end the corruption and the problems that EIC was facing at that point in time? The answer was no. As usual, there was some or the other loopholes which were there. Okay, so the loophole which was there, the first thing was that the court of directors by EIC was itself corrupt. ठीक है, so in 1781 the British government called the court of directors to inquire about this and try to rectify the defects of regulating act. However, the court of directors bribed British government and made an act of settlement requesting the government to stay silent for a few years. After this, guys, we had the amending act of 1781. It created a tussle between the Supreme Court and the Governor General in Council. It attempted to curtail the power of the Supreme Court in favor of the Governor General. Okay, the Governor General and the Council were exempt from the jurisdiction of Supreme Court for acts done by them in their official capacity. By the Regulating Act of 1773, the servants of the company came under dual control, Governor General, Council and Supreme Court. The amendment exempted the public servants in the company in their official capacity. For example, revenue collectors and judicial officers were exempt from prerogative of Supreme Court, and the jurisdiction was confined to Calcutta. Okay, after this, guys, we had something which was called the Pitt's India Act. Okay, again, the British government wanted to rectify the defects of the regulating act, so they passed the Pitt's India Act of 1784. Why the name Pitt? The name of the Prime Minister at that point in time was William Pitt. The act knew the EIC COD was corrupt. So of course, as I've stated, the East India Company had a court of directors. The court of directors was corrupt, so they decided to reduce its power. ठीक है, एक बहुत सिंपल सा मैकेनिशन है गाइस. ठीक है, आपको पता है रेगुलेटिंग एक्ट हमने इन प्लेस डाली है, उसको जो हैंडल करता है वो है COD, और हमें पता है कि ये COD क्या है, करप्ट है. सो जो नेक्स्ट एक्ट थी, जो कि पिट्स इंडिया एक्ट थी 1784 की, उसमें हमने बोला कि जो COD की पावर है उसको कर्टेल कर दो, ठीक है। ये हमने बोला पिट्स इंडिया एक्ट में। पिट्स इंडिया एक्ट का नाम पिट्स इंडिया एक्ट क्यों था? क्योंकि जो उस टाइम में प्राइम मिनिस्टर था उसका नाम था विलियम पिट। द एक्ट न्यू द EICs, ओके। नाउ COD, द कोर्ट ऑफ डायरेक्टर्स विल लुक आफ्टर द कमर्शियल functions only, and on only a new body, board of control, will take care of political functions. We shall call it a system of double government, ठीक है। सो इस एक्ट में एक नई चीज़ क्या थी गाइस? इस एक्ट में एक नई चीज़ ये थी कि जो भी कोर्ट ऑफ डायरेक्टर्स था ना, ठीक है, उसकी पावर हमने कहीं ना कहीं कर्टेल कर दी थी, क्योंकि वो बहुत ज़्यादा एफिशिएंटली काम नहीं कर पा रहा था। एंड इसकी पावर कर्टेल करने के बाद हमने जो है एक नया बोर्ड ऑफ डायरेक्टर्स बनाया था, ठीक है। बोर्ड ऑफ डायरेक्टर्स, सॉरी, बोर्ड ऑफ कंट्रोल, नॉट डायरेक्टर्स, इट्स BOC, बोर्ड ऑफ कंट्रोल, BOC, ठीक है। हमने एक BOC बनाया था। एंड जब हमने ऐसा कुछ करा, ठीक है, ये जब हमने कुछ करा तो इसको हम बोलने लग गए कि एक डुअल गवर्नमेंट, ठीक है, एक तरह का डुअल गवर्नमेंट हमने इस्टेब्लिश कर दिया, या हम बोलने लगे हमने एक डायरकी इस्टेब्लिश कर दिया 1784 पिट्स इंडिया एक्ट के बाद, ठीक है। Okay guys, can somebody please send me a message on the live chat and just let me know if what I'm teaching is making any sense to you guys, because if it is not making any sense then all my efforts are going to waste, ठीक है। तो anyway guys, जो सिविल एंड मिलिट्री फंक्शंस हैं बोर्ड ऑफ कंट्रोल के, वो बोर्ड ऑफ कंट्रोल मैनेज करता था, और कोर्ट ऑफ डायरेक्टर्स जो था वो कमर्शियल फंक्शंस, ठीक है, कमर्शियल फंक्शंस को मैनेज करता था। ये इन दोनों के बीच में एक क्लियर कट डिस्टिंक्शन थी। तो जो फर्स्ट क्वेश्चन हमसे पूछा जाएगा पिट्स इंडिया एक्ट पे, वो ये होगा कि हमने पिट्स इंडिया एक्ट का नाम पिट्स इंडिया एक्ट क्यों रखा? हमने इसलिए करा क्योंकि जो उस टाइम पे UK का PM था उसका नाम पिट था, ठीक है। He had Pitt in his name, so because he had Pitt in his name, we decided to keep the name of the act as the Pitt's India Act of 1784. The second important fact while discussing this act is that we understood that the court of directors, which was established in the act of 1773, was very corrupt, okay. And in order to reduce the corruption, we needed to introduce diarchy, we needed to introduce a dual government, and we had to establish a board of control. So the court of directors will continue looking after the commercial functions, all right, whereas the board of control will look after the civil and the military functions, ठीक है। So this is something we have to know. And because it had two systems of governance, it was called as a system of double government. UPSC can definitely ask you these questions, and guys, it's very easy to score marks in these, because this is something that every person who's studying for UPSC, every person who's studying for any government paper has to remember, okay. So with this act, with the Pitt's India Act of 1784, for the first time we started to call if the board of controllers empowered to supervise, direct all operations of civil and military or revenues, and they were often called as the British possessions in India. For the first time the word British possessions was used. Hence British government was given supreme control over companies' affairs and its administration in India. So with this, a new term was introduced, a new terminology which we are going to remember, ठीक है। क्या कहते थे उसको? ब्रिटिश पोजेशंस, ऑलराइट, ब्रिटिश पोजेशंस कहते थे। ठीक है. Anyway, let's go back. Let's move forward to the next act, which was the Charter Act of 1813. It abolished the trade monopoly of the company in India except over tea trade. The monopoly of the company over trade with China continued. It asserted the sovereignty of British Crown over the company's territories in India. The act empowered courts in India. It granted permission to Christian missionaries to come to India for promoting moral and religious improvements. There was also provision that the company should invest 1 lakh every year in Western education of Indians. Alright, so these were some of the components of 1813. Simply just remember three things. Try to remember that the trade monopoly of the company was abolished except टी ट्रेड. ठीक है, टी ट्रेड के सिवाय जो है हमने जो है वो मोनोपली जो थी वो हमने अबॉलिश कर दी, ट्रेड मोनोपली जो कंपनी की थी. सेकेंड पॉइंट ये है, द मोनोपली ऑफ द कंपनी ओवर ट्रेड विद चाइना कंटिन्यूड. इट असर्टेड द सॉवरेनिटी ऑफ द ब्रिटिश क्राउन ओवर द कंपनीज टेरिटरीज इन इंडिया. The act also empowered the courts in India. It granted permission to the Christian missionaries to come to India for promoting moral and religious improvements. There was also a provision that the company should invest 1 lakh every year in Western education of Indians. So these were the things. Okay, let's move forward to the next act, which is the Charter Act of 1833. Here the government decided that instead of Governor General of Bengal, let us call him the Governor General of India. Okay, so again guys, this act is important. Okay, this act is going to be the Charter Act of 1833. तो इस एक्ट में क्या हुआ गाइस, जो गवर्नर जनरल ऑफ बंगाल था उसका नाम चेंज करके कर दिया गवर्नर जनरल. ठीक है, सॉरी, इसको कर दिया हमने गवर्नर जनरल ऑफ इंडिया. एंड जो भी सिविल एंड मिलिट्री फंक्शंस थे, ठीक है, वो हमने वेस्ट कर दिए किसको, गवर्नर जनरल को. ठीक है, सारा जो सिविल और मिलिट्री पावर था वो गवर्नर जनरल ऑफ इंडिया को हमने क्या कर दिया, वेस्ट कर दिया. और हमने क्या करा, वी ऑल्सो गेव एक्सक्लूसिव लेजिस्लेटिव पावर फॉर द इंटायर ब्रिटिश इंडिया. And guys, you know, we made him so powerful, the Governor General of India, we made him so powerful because he had all civil and military functions that he could bend, ठीक है, bend, and he could kick everyone. Bend plus kick, ठीक है, बेंड टिक, इसको याद कैसे करना है. तो जो फर्स्ट गवर्नर जनरल ऑफ इंडिया था गाइस, कौन था, इट वॉज विलियम बेंटिक. He was very powerful guys, he was very powerful because all the civil and military functions were given to him. Okay, and that made him very very powerful, so he could bend and kick everyone to his whims and wishes. So his name was what? His name was William Bentinck. Okay, this act ended all the activities of East India Company as a commercial body. East India Company was left purely administrative body to implement what the government says. The Charter Act of 1833 attempted to introduce a system of open competition for selection of civil servants, but COD pleaded, please negate this provision. So this provision was negated. Charter Act of 1853. Let's move on to the next act, the Charter Act of 1853. The Governor General of India could not do all the work. So the legislative and executive functions of the Governor General were separated for the first time. So guys, see, you know, there are two things that happen in life. The first thing that happens is you know, make a position, you make it very very powerful, and you suddenly come to the realization that maybe this is not for the best. Okay, like what happened. So in the next act, which is the Charter Act of 1854, or is it, yeah, sorry, 1853, you come to the conclusion that there needs to be some amount, some kind of liquidation in the power. Okay, some kind of liquidation in the power structure. Okay, and you say that instead of vesting all the civil and military functions in one person, let us decentralize a little. Okay, so for the first time there was a separate legislative council. ठीक है, तो अभी तक क्या था गाइस, सारा जो लेजिस्लेटिव एंड एग्जीक्यूटिव फंक्शन था वो आपका गवर्नर जनरल ऑफ इंडिया कर रहा था. पहली बारी जो था इस एक्ट में, जो लेजिस्लेटिव काउंसिल है वो सेपरेट हो गया गाइस, किससे, एग्जीक्यूटिव से. ठीक है, and it was called as the Indian Legislative Council and local representation was allowed. So जो ये council था इसको कहते हैं हम Indian Legislative Council, and this is important because इसमें जो था guys local representation क्या था, allowed था. ठीक है, it was allowed, local representation was allowed in this system. All right. So it basically, the legislative council, the Indian Legislative Council acted as a mini parliament. Thus legislation for the first time was treated as a special function of the government requiring special machinery and special process. Now it needed good civil servants to help in framing and implementing the legislation. The Charter Act of 1853 introduced an open competition of the system of selection and recruitment of civil servants. This act also extended the company's rule and allowed it to retain the possession of Indian territories on the trust for the British Crown. Alright, but it did not specify any particular period unlike previous charters. This is clear indication that company's rule could be terminated at any time the parliament liked. Okay, so in the Charter Act of 1853, the first thing we saw was that there was a separation of the legislative and the executive functions. So there was an Indian central legislature which was established, which was called as a mini parliament, and it needed, and it allowed local representation for the first time, and it also needed good civil servants to help frame and implement the legislation. So the Charter Act of 1853 introduced an open competition. The system of selection and recruitment of civil servants was also open to Indians. This act extended the company's rule and allowed it to retain the possession of Indian territories. Alright, so all of those things were there. Okay, so guys, with this we come to an end to today's class. Today's class was about the company rule, okay, which was essentially the period from 1773 to 1858. Alright, from tomorrow we'll be doing all the crown rule. We're going to finish it, but before we do that, let's take a look at a PYQ which was asked. By which of the following acts was the Governor General of Bengal designated as the Governor General of India? Of course, the answer is very obvious. We have just done it. The option D is the right answer. Let's take a look. Yes. Option D. So guys, this is why you should, study. UPSC can ask anything. And luckily, there was a question this time from something I have discussed with my students. So yeah. Okay, before we come to an end of the day, let me just, okay, yeah, let's quickly revise everything we have done till now. And yeah, so of course the first thing that we discussed was that there was a battle. The first thing was in 1600 the EIC came as a trading company. Okay, in 1765. Sorry, in 1757, for the first time, we had the Battle of Plassey. We have extensively discussed how this was a battle between Robert Clive and the East, who was supported by the East India Company, versus Siraj Uddola, who was betrayed by Mir Jafar, who later succeeded him to the throne. Of course, Mir Jafar was later betrayed, and Mir Qasim became the new puppet ruler, which came under the British. Anyway, all of this happened in the Battle of Plassey. In 1765, we had something called as the Battle of Buxar. After this Battle of Buxar, Shah Alam had to give over Diwani rights. Okay, Diwani rights was something we have discussed extensively, that after we obtained the Diwani rights from Shah Alam, we know the East India Company was no longer a trading entity. In fact, it also enjoyed certain control over the revenue functions of India. Alright, so this came with the Diwani rights. After Diwani rights in 1857, we had so after this, we had the first act, and this act started something which was called as the company rule in India. So for the first time, the company wanted to rule, not just act as a trading company. Okay, and in 1857, from 1857 to 1957, we had something which was called as the crown rule. Alright, so under the company rule, there were a lot of acts which happened. The first one was the Regulating Act of 1773. In this, we discussed some important points. We discussed how there was a Governor General of Bengal, okay, who had supreme power over the presidencies of Bengal, Bihar and Odisha, okay, or Madras. Is it Madras or is it Odisha? Oh my god, like the names are just so confusing sometimes. Alright, anyway, he had so there is no Bihar, there is just Bombay and there is Madras, okay, and of course Bengal is there. So Bombay and Madras के ऊपर जो supreme control था वो Governor General of Bengal का था under the Regulating Act of 1773. The first point. The second point is that the Supreme Court was established in 1774. There was one CJI who was there plus 3 judges. So the CJI was Elijah MP. Of course, another important thing to remember is the Governor General of Bengal also had something like an executive council which had 4 other members, alright, to just support him through his stuff. So after this act, after the Regulating Act, we had the Amending Act. Alright, this is the second one, the Amending Act of 1781. Alright, so of course, what was the need of the Regulating Act? The need of the Regulating Act was that there was rampant corruption, there were a lot of problems that were happening, and in order to curtail those problems and to just make sure that corruption wasn't prevailing, it was needed. A Regulating Act was needed. So there were some loopholes and some problems in the act, due to which an Amending Act was there. And in fact, when the Amending Act could not take care of everything, a Pitt's India Act was passed in 1784. Now this Pitt's India Act is important because William Pitt was the UK PM at that point in time, and so this was called as the Pitt's India Act. Okay, some other important things that you have to keep in mind while discussing the Pitt's India Act was that the Court of Directors, which came under the Regulating Act, was very powerful. Okay, the Court of Directors, so the functions were distributed between the Court of Directors and the Board of Control, which was established by the Pitt's India Act. So whereas the Court of Directors looked after the commercial functions, the Board of Directors looked after the political functions and even the military functions, right? So there was a system of dual government which was introduced, and after the system of dual government was introduced, this basically ensured that the dual government system prevailed under the Pitt's India Act. So also the next thing is, for the first time, Indians were called as British possessions, right? Just possessive. very very possessive about their territory. And of course, the first time this word was used was in the Pitt's India Act of 1784. All right. So, and the next thing is that the executive council of the governor was reduced to 3. So, in the first act, regulating act, there was one governor general of Bengal, plus there was 4 members. However, it was reduced to 3. The number was reduced to 3. After this, we had the Charter Act. All right. The Charter Act of 1813, which basically abolished all kinds of trade with China except the trade in tea. Okay. After, we also, there was some kind of funds that the company would invest, around 1 lakh rupees, invest in education of Indians. So that was also considered, that was also taken into account under this Act of 1813. Okay. After this, we have the Charter Act of 1833. All right. The fifth thing, the Charter Act of 1833. So this was the UPSC question which was asked in 2023 prelims. So something important happened in this. The Governor General of Bengal was changed to the Governor General of India, and he became a very powerful entity, the Governor General of India, because all kinds of civil and military functions were vested in him. ठीक है, तो उसको जो है दुनिया की सारी पावर दे दी. एंड ऐसा जो इंसान था उसका नाम था विलियम बेंटिक. विलियम बेंटिक इसलिए था, ऐसे याद करो, दैट ही कैन बेंड एंड ही कैन किक एनीवन टू हिज विल. ठीक है, एंड बिकॉज ही कुड डू दैट, ही वॉज all powerful, extremely powerful, and he was the Governor General of India. This was asked in UPSC this year, so please don't think कि UPSC नहीं पूछेगा. UPSC पूछेंगे. They can ask you anything, and this was comparatively an easier question that they have asked in comparison to other questions that they have already asked you. Alright, so please remember, it was in 1833 that the Governor General of Bengal became the Governor General of India, and all kinds of civil and military functions were vested in him. ठीक है, and now the East India Company was, they were no longer hiding कि हम चोर हैं. ठीक है, they simply said कि हाँ, हम लोग जो है एक कमर्शियल प्रोग्राम से नहीं, हम लोग एक प्योरली एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव बॉडी की तरह एक्ट करेंगे. ठीक है, तो ये 1833 में हम लोगों ने इस्टेब्लिश कर दिया था. इसमें जो है ये सब है. ठीक है, एंड ऑफ कोर्स एक इम्पॉर्टेंट पॉइंट ये है कि सिविल सर्वेंट्स के लिए जो है ओपन कंपटीशन 1833 में इंट्रोड्यूस हुआ था. सो दैट अगेन मेक्स इट एन इम्पॉर्टेंट एक्ट, वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट एक्ट इन फैक्ट. ऑलराइट, सो आफ्टर दिस, after this we have the last act, which is the 1853 Charter Act. ठीक है, this act is important because in this we understand something important. We understand that the Governor General of India became an all too powerful position, so it became necessary to separate his legislative functions from his executive functions. So an Indian Legislative Council was established. All right, and it was also referred to as a mini parliament. ठीक है, तो जो लेजिस्लेटिव फंक्शंस हैं उनको हमने अलग कर दिया था, एंड एक मिनी पार्लियामेंट हमने कर दिया था. ये एक्ट इसलिए इम्पोर्टेंट है बिकॉज फॉर द फर्स्ट टाइम यू हैड समथिंग विच वॉज कॉल्ड एज लोकल रिप्रेजेंटेशन. ठीक है, लोकल रिप्रेजेंटेशन मतलब कि जो इंडिया में लोकल इंडियंस हैं वो इस पार्लियामेंट में जो है अपने आप को रिप्रेजेंट कर सकते हैं. ठीक है, सो दिस हैपेंड. So guys, in the previous act, the open competition for civil servants was actually negated. ठीक है, इन्होंने बोला था कि हम लोग करेंगे सिविल सर्वेंट्स के लिए कुछ करेंगे 1833 में, बट वो हो नहीं पाया था. ठीक है. In fact, it got negated. It was just a proposal which was given in the Act of 1833, and in 1853 this proposal manifested, and we had Indian civil servants. ठीक है. We had open competition for these guys. All right. So yeah, okay. So if anybody is there on the live chat right now, just say hi or say something, because I think we will just, like, this was the last thing that we were discussing for today. So if you guys can just say hi or say bye or just say something or just like this video and just subscribe to my channel, it will be really really nice, right? So guys, tomorrow at the same time I'll most probably come live around 9:30, maximum 10 o'clock, because after 10 o'clock I also get tired. So I'll come live and we'll discuss the second part of the crown rule. Again, we will revise and we will discuss whatever we have done in the first part, because let's not underestimate UPSC. Let's not even underestimate the state services and all the other papers that you have. Even for your UGC net, they can ask you questions on acts, they can ask you questions on regulations, they can ask you questions on government policies. It is completely within their ambit, within the scope of what they are teaching, for them to ask you questions out of this. Okay, Rija is saying hi. Hi Rija, how are you? Please like the video and please subscribe to my channel if you guys are liking. अगर आपको कुछ भी समझ आ रहा है पॉलिटी का जो मैं आपको बता रही हूँ, तो प्लीज़ मेरे चैनल के साथ जुड़िए, लाइक करिए, सब्सक्राइब करिए. मैं जो हूँ हर रोज़ कुछ ना कुछ नया डालती रहूँगी कंटेंट आप लोगों के लिए. उनमें काफ़ी सारे जैसे क्वेश्चंस हैं, मैं आप लोगों के साथ डिस्कस करूँगी. जो प्रीवियस ईयर क्वेश्चंस यूपीएससी ने पूछे हैं, यूजीसी नेट में पूछे हैं, फ्यूचर में क्या क्वेश्चंस हम लोग कर सकते हैं. येस रीजा, ऑफ कोर्स आई विल गिव एट एनी एडवाइस दैट यू वांट. प्लीज़ आस्क योर क्वेश्चन. आप प्रश्न पूछिए. मैं ऑफ कोर्स क्लास एंड हो गई है, तो कोई भी डाउट्स, कोई भी क्वेश्चंस आप पूछना चाहते हो तो आप बिल्कुल खुल के पूछ सकते हो. So yeah, you can just ask. I'm just going to increase the screen size. Okay. So Rija is asking me, should I focus on the newspaper or should I focus on NCRT right now? So Rija, according to what you have told me, it seems like you are either in class 1 or you are a plus 2 student. So see, NCRT is something which you have to anyway study. ठीक है, every time you sit down and you want to study for UPSC, you have to keep in mind कि आपको NCRT कभी ना कभी पढ़नी पड़ेगी. आपको न्यूज़पेपर्स भी पढ़ने पड़ेंगे, बट क्योंकि आप प्लस 1 में हो, UPSC पूछते हैं क्वेश्चंस करंट अफेयर्स से रिलेटेड, बट ऐसा नहीं पूछते कि मतलब वो 4 साल पुराना क्वेश्चन आपसे पूछेंगे. एंड प्लस इवन टू अंडरस्टैंड न्यूज़पेपर में कंटेंट क्या है, आपको कुछ स्टैटिक, कुछ जीके का जो है वो ऑलरेडी लेवल पता होना चाहिए. ठीक है, काफ़ी सारी चीज़ें इकोनॉमिक्स की, काफ़ी सारी चीज़ें पॉलिटी की, जब तक आपको नहीं पता है आप न्यूज़पेपर का कुछ सेंस ही नहीं बना पाओगे. ठीक है, मेरे को व्हेन आई वाज 19 years old, it was very difficult for me to read the newspaper. So to even understand the newspaper, you need to have a basic level. You need to have at least studied the basic GK of economics, of polity, at least to understand what is being discussed. For example, there is an article about the office of governor, and you haven't studied Laxmikanth, you don't know which article the office of governor is in and you don't know the static part, it becomes very difficult to understand the current part. So I would recommend and I would say that you stick to your NCERT, stick to your basics, because anyway when you will give it when you are 21 22, so they will not ask you current affairs जो 4 साल पुराने हैं. हाँ, you should have some idea but इतना नहीं कि like that. So yeah, focus on your NCERT, but of course cultivating the habit of reading the newspaper is also a good thing. Okay. Her next question is, syllabus should look decoded, syllabus or original? I'm sorry, I can't understand your question. You need to be perhaps a little more clear, Rija. And also guys, whoever is liking the video and whoever is liking all the free content I'm making for you all in my post study hours, please don't forget to like the video. ठीक है, वीडियो को लाइक करो, मेरे चैनल को सब्सक्राइब करो. सो आई ऑल्सो फील हैप्पी दैट स्टूडेंट्स आर लाइकिंग, एंड अपने फ्रेंड्स को मेरे चैनल के बारे में बताओ कि वो यहाँ पढ़ सकते हैं. ओके, सो शी इज़ आस्किंग मी, शुड आई लुक एट द डिकोडेड सिलेबस ऑफ कोचिंग इंस्टीट्यूशंस? Yes, Rija, you can definitely either you can start remembering the syllabus which is given on the UPSC website. Generally I say that it's always best to stick to primary resources. अगर आप UPSC की साइट से syllabus पढ़ोगे वो आपको ज़्यादा समझ आएगा in comparison to what you will understand if you are studying decoded. वैसे even decoded syllabus is good, but always try to stick to primary resources. After studying so much, after doing a masters, this is my advice, stick to primary resources. But of course आप बायजूस या दृष्टि या किसी का decoded syllabus भी देख सकते हो ताकि आपको और easily समझ आ जाए. ठीक है, और कुछ any other question? Okay, so guys, please do subscribe to my channel. Please do subscribe. She's asking me, what's your opinion about open schooling for more time in prep? No, Rija, you definitely don't need open schooling or a correspondence course. UPSC is difficult, but manage हो जाएगा. आप कॉलेज में जब आओगे तो आप कॉलेज में जो है मतलब हाँ, कॉलेज आप जो है वो ओपन कर सकते हो इग्नू से या कहीं से भी कर सकते हो, बट स्कूल के लिए तो UPSC के लिए 3-4 साल है, इतना टाइम नहीं चाहिए. ठीक है, इतने टाइम में तो बहुत कुछ हो जाता है. सो यू कैन स्टिक टू योर नॉर्मल स्कूलिंग एज वेल, because even in school you are learning your NCERTs and your NCERTs are important for UPSC. Okay, so yeah, no need to jump shift and to be that stressed when you are so young. You can chill and take a break and आराम से पढ़ो, आराम से करो, सब कुछ हो जाएगा. Okay. Okay, guys, please subscribe to my channel. ठीक है, it's going to be 10:30 soon, so I have to sleep. And please like the video, Rija. Tell your friends to like my video, to like my content, so I feel happy when I post all this new content for you guys. Okay, so, and if you have any other questions you can ask me, but it seems like most of the people have signed off. So of course, thank you guys for coming. Tomorrow again I'll take a class at the same time here, so be there, be present, and see you all. Good night.